Good evening and thank you so much for joining us tonight on this episode of Family Matters. My name is Purity Museo. The latest survey by the World Health Organization shows that some burden in terms of funding, which is halting and disrupting mental health services in Africa. And Kenya is one of the countries that has been affected and of course experiencing funding constraints. And this coming at a time when mental health conditions and of course are on the rise due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Experts say the lockdown restrictions that had been imposed since COVID-19 was first reported globally, as well as the economic constraints occasioned by the pandemic, is one of the contributors to the mental health challenges on the rise in the country. So joining us tonight is Elmad Regan, who is a psychologist based here in the country, to just talk about this important discussion. Thank you so much for making time for the show tonight. And of course, we are talking about mental health, and there have been a lot of discussions on mental health crisis globally. Of what concern should this be in the country? Maybe let's talk about the burden from where you sit as an expert. Are we experiencing a surge of cases of mental health conditions?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me on the show. And as you've rightly mentioned, there is cause for alarm because there's a surge of cases of mental illnesses in the country, especially occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. Because when there's a pandemic globally, that means there's cause for alarm. And alarm brings with it fear and anxiety. And so the moment there's fear and anxiety, people will tend to look for different resorts to buffer themselves against any sort of pandemic that might bring, uncertainties in their lives. And see, that's why the reports are saying that cases of suicide, for example, have gone up, cases of anxiety as a disorder have gone up, cases of depressive disorders have gone up as a result of this pandemic, and of course significant other variables that we will talk about as the show continues.
Right. Yeah. And when you say as a result of the pandemic, what aspect of the pandemic are we talking about? Is it because of the affected economy, the lockdowns? How exactly is this pandemic affecting people mentally? So
largely the lockdown, as I've mentioned before, the lockdown imposes a great deal of anxiety and fear. And you see, that means that people will do anything and everything to make sure that they are cushioned from the effects of the lockdown. As you all can remember, when the partial lockdown was announced, for example, in the country, people went on a shopping spree, stocking their shelves with goodies, food stuff, and all this, so that they are safe from the effects of the lockdown. And this consequently meant that people were jobless. Because the moment you've gone and done your shopping and everything and you're safe that I'm going to stay home, that means for somebody else who's producing whatever they're producing, that means there's no more job for them. Yeah. So with this prolonged, it means therefore that the economy suffers. Gradually, every other aspect of livelihood is affected by the fact that there is this lockdown imposed by the occasioning of the pandemic. Yeah.
And with the surge of the mental health conditions globally, and initially we were talking about the kind of stigma that is associated with mental illness, and people are not coming out because they do not want to be stigmatized. Would you say that now people are coming out to talk about what they are going through and to seek help, or we are still where we were before the pandemic?
Unfortunately, we are still where we were before the pandemic, because human beings, before they open up and share that they have a problem, especially men for that reason, it will take them a bit of time. Because with this pandemic, seeking for help almost seems like a shame to some people, because people tend to assume or presume that if I ask person X and Y for help, then I might be a bit of a stubborn thorn in the flesh to them, because they're also suffering the same consequences of the pandemic. And see, people suffer in silence, and if you ask me, it's even more worse before the pandemic came. Yeah, so this silence creeps in the individual's psyche and every other aspect of their livelihoods, and it makes things even more worse. So the stigma has even gone high, if you ask me, and those who ask for help are only but a small percentage out of the larger population.
So even from your day-to-day interaction with your patients, you wouldn't say the number of those who are seeking help has increased because of this stigma and people shying away?
No, maybe only those who are repeat clients who have maybe had previous sessions with me or with other experts, but some do come as a result of referrals to seek help because they see it as as a last resolve. When everything else has failed, it's like, okay, fine, I think I should go and see a therapist so that I'm assisted in this situation. Yeah.
And right now, globally, mental health is the topic of discussion everywhere. So what can be done to help people who are struggling? Because right now, I know 1 in every, even 5 or 4 people are experiencing one or two of these conditions. So what could be done to help these people come out and talk about this issue? Because it's a crisis that is building up globally. We're not just talking about Kenya here.
Yeah, so what should be done in my perspective and my opinion is that there should be a lot of sensitization to the masses. Because minus that happening, then it will be very difficult to achieve whatever outcomes we seek to achieve. You see, the same way we give airwave or airplay to battles against cancer, against malaria, and against all these other illnesses, is the same way that we should champion to, give mental health and mental illness the airplay that it needs. Because technically speaking, the moment the mind is sick, the whole body is sick. And so you cannot treat any other part of the body if the mind is sick. So a lot of sensitization needs to go into place globally, locally, regionally, so that everybody is aware and start embracing mental health and the intricacies that involves, so that everybody is aware of the consequences, the effects, how it happens, all this, so that we are all in the same boat and moving towards the same direction. That is wellness.
Right. And before that happens, you'll be telling us what actually this mental illness is all about.
Definitely.
Yeah. But we had, before the pandemic, we had a mental health task force that was going around and seeking public opinion on what they feel about the conditions in the country. And most of the recommendations that Kenyans had was to make mental health conditions a public health emergency in the country. Maybe from your own opinion, would you say that these conditions are being, or people who are struggling with mental illnesses are getting the kind of attention that they deserve? Could that be a challenge?
It is a challenge, and if you ask me, it should be made a public health concern and given the attention it needs. But again, unfortunately, it's not being given the much attention it deserves. Because some people say that, well, it's not as crucial as other illnesses. You could argue on those lines, but as I mentioned earlier, the moment the mind is unwell, then normal functioning ceases to be. Because with mental health, the moment your behavior is not in sync, your emotions, your feelings are out of touch, then there is a huge challenge that is, that is to be overcome. And so, in my opinion, from where I see it, the attention it needs to be given is not yet achieved, and that's a big challenge.
With the attention that is being given not yet achieved, and with the kind of stigma, patients are not coming out, are you seeing an uptick or an increase of these cases as we even continue to fight COVID-19 and its effects? Are you, as an expert, seeing the country reporting more cases and getting to a point where now things are out of control?
There's likely to be an influx in the cases being reported with regard to mental illnesses or mental health for that reason, because the moment you start downplaying such a serious concern, health concern like mental health, then we are just having a ticking time bomb in our hands. If I may give the example of when the movement restriction was lifted, and consequently the restaurants and the bars or operations uplifted as well, that week alone there was an increase in cases of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and all these other forms of violence, which are related to issues of mental health. Because why would somebody in their right senses pick up a knife and stab their spouse, or pick up a gun and shoot their lover for that reason? It's because we are still in the cocoon believing that it's not as serious as we think it is. But the more, in my projections, the more this pandemic exists and the more we don't give mental health the attention it deserves, then we should brace ourselves for even tougher days.
All right. Yeah. Well said. So you're talking about awareness that ought to be done in regard to mental health. And of course, every person was affected by the pandemic in one way or another. So when we talk about mental conditions, is it just the normal stress of life, or it goes beyond this? Let's define mental conditions or illness. Unhealthy,
Very true.
Yeah.
So actually, thanks for bringing that up, because often enough we tend to confuse what mental health is and what mental illness is, because at times we even use the terms interchangeably. So mental health is the state of being well, physically, socially, emotionally, cognitively, and even in terms of your behavior. It's the wholesome wellness of an individual, especially with regard to how their cognitive functions are related. That is mental health. Now, mental illness, on the other hand, is the absence or the disconnect in functionality of a person's thinking, feelings, emotions, behaviors, and judgments. Now, when these aspects are not in sync, either one of them or all of them, then you say that there is a reason here, or rather there is a cause for alarm that needs to be looked into. Yeah.
So now we are talking about when you're not mentally healthy, so you are sick.
You are sick?
Yes.
Like somebody who has any other ailment and you need to be treated for that condition.
Right. So do we have different types of the disorders that are associated with mental unhealthy lifestyles?
Yeah.
Or what exactly, are we talking about depression, bipolar disorders? What are some of these disorders that are linked to unhealthy mental health? Or which term do I use?
Mental illness. Yes.
Mental health.
Yeah, so there's quite a number of mental illnesses or mental health disorders, but I'm going to mention just but a few which are common. So one, we have anxiety disorders, which typically are accustomed by a great deal of panic and worry. For no apparent reason, you're just worried or anxious about what will happen, what's going to happen. So we have anxiety disorders as was one category. We have mood disorders, which include bipolar mood disorder, where, if I may give an example, maybe in the morning you wake up, you're feeling very hyper, very lively, very jovial, but in the evening, for no apparent reason at all, you're gloomy and sad and down.
Do you need treatment for that?
That needs treatment because it's not normal. I mean, what triggered this being sad all of a sudden?
You got tired.
Nobody wronged you, nobody stepped on your foot, nobody did something wrong to you, but from now you just get irritable and you go down. Yeah, so that equaling this symptom. So that is the mood disorders. We also have eating disorders like anorexia. So anorexia is a condition where somebody decides to eat very small portions of food, and especially on this disorder, ladies or girls are culprits because they want to have a certain body form or body shape to fit into what the society deems as good or as okay. And some even go to extents of even using slimming pills to maintain that body shape that they desire. The flip side of that is what we call bulimia. Now, bulimia is the binge eating. You eat a lot to what human beings will call crazy. It's that eating that is just having that insatiable appetite just to eat and eat. And if you ask the person doing that, they say that they do that to cope with their stressors. But is it healthy? Because the more you ingest food into your body, you are at the verge of getting other conditions. You might get diabetes if, for example, you're taking a lot of sugar and stuff like that. Yeah. Then we also have depressive disorders and schizophrenic disorders and many other ones. Yeah, but these are the major ones which are common, which we tend to contend with on a daily basis. And of course, the post-traumatic stress disorder, which happens as a result of having a bad experience that happened to you maybe a couple of years ago, and then from nowhere, you've healed, but it hits you back again, and you start going through the process again as if it happened yesterday.
Yes. Yeah. And the ones that you mentioned, because you're talking about anxiety, depressive, are they linked? Would you say that the pandemic may have caused this, or what exactly are usually the causes for all this?
There are different causes that attribute to mental health. One, we have genetics which come to play, because some of these disorders are inherited. They can be passed from a generation to another, or from mother to child, for example. Yeah. Assuming, for example, a mother was an alcoholic during her pregnancy and a heavy drug user, and she delivers, chances are the child might take up the same tendency, because alcoholism in itself is a disease. It's a mental disease that needs treatment. Yeah. So genetics also comes to play as a risk factor that predisposes one to having mental health condition. Then we also have the environment where somebody has been brought up in. If, say, for example, you were raised up in a very violent environment where you're exposed to violence, a lot of chaos, as you grow up, you have tendencies of being a maniac or a maniac for that reason. And manic disorders are there, and they have very bad consequences. Yeah. Then there is also drug use, as I've mentioned. Some people just decide to take up drugs and use it. And the more they use these drugs, they consequently but surely affect their mental health. And of course, previous experiences like accidents and traumas and all that can attribute to one having mental health. Now, coming to the pandemic, is it a cause for alarm, and is it possible that it causes mental health illness? The answer is yes, because pandemics are things that don't just happen every other day. They probably take a lot of time. Like the last serious pandemic that we had in the world was the Spanish flu. Yeah, and that was a long time ago. And how people coped with that was was quite different from how we compare with it today. Of course, they had their fair share of challenges and troubles with regard to how it affected their mental health. But even today, the announcement that there was a pandemic made people look at things differently. You know, even the daily briefings in the country, the CS for Health coming to give numbers and figures about, the pandemic, that alone is enough to shock people and bring, fear to people. But the intention, I believe, is not to shock people, but to inform people that this and this is happening and this is how we should handle it. Yes. And
because that's the intention. Most of the time when pandemic come, the intention of awareness is just to make people stay safe.
True.
Because in some instances, there's no cure or vaccine for some of these viruses that we experience. So how best should pandemics be handled, or how best should people react to pandemics to just minimize the rates of mental illnesses that come up each time there is a pandemic?
Yes, of course, with pandemics, there are different strategies of response that are put to play so that the masses are well braced and well equipped on how to handle the pandemic. Now, speaking in the mental health front, what needs to be done, or rather what is often done, is to educate the masses on the truths with the pandemic and the lies or myths regarding the pandemic. Because the moment there is speculation or a myth regarding the pandemic, then there's a lot of confusion and mayhem that accompanies that. And that is what brings the anxiety and the fear. And if this is prolonged, then it might even go down to depression, because people don't know how to react to the news they have received. And so that's why any health committee or health team in any country, for that reason, will try as much as possible to give the correct and precise information with regard to the pandemic at hand, or if it's an epidemic within the country, so that the masses have the right information and they know how to handle themselves with regard to that particular situation at hand.
And at this time, point, it was inevitable, because even the scientists are still saying we are learning more about the pandemic. One day they wake up and say it's not airborne. The other minute you hear it's airborne. One time WHO comes out and says that actually there is herd immunity. Just the other day, it is said that there is no immunity, and if you once are infected, you could be reinfected. So how can really, in such a time or scenarios, how can people be cushioned from these shocking messages that, because when you are told that it's airborne, it's no longer about social distancing, then the first thing that comes to your mind is, could I have contracted it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is true that with pandemics, there are different dynamics that go to play, and pinpointing, exactly the causative agents, for example, can be a bit challenging or difficult. But the truth is, there are some very basic measures that, when followed, can help to a great percentage or to a great deal. Basic things like personal hygiene go a long way in helping reduce the effect of this pandemic. Case in point, we've seen, just the other week the schools were reopened, and the numbers that are being reported in the country are again causing alarm. So the question is it that we relaxed so much and thought that this thing is over and, we can live back to normal, but then, as we see from the numbers, the twist is, is taking another curve altogether. So what's important is, in as much as there is still, a bit of fumble here and there with exactly how to contain the pandemic, we should go to the very basics of healthcare that you are given from credible sources like the WHO and the Ministry of Health locally, so that we are safe. In as much as there is a bit of uncertainty, you may say, or somebody might argue, but there are those basic guidelines which are given, which are way much better than living carefree, because it's better, as it said, it's better to prevent than to cure. Yeah.
And you mentioned that if not taken care of the anxiety and everything that you're going through, then you may fall into depression. Does that mean that depression is maybe more severe kind of a mental illness as compared to others that you had mentioned?
All of them are severe, if you ask me. But you see, when, say, for example, somebody has just a simple stressor, before they reach to the level of depression, they have gone through various similar other stages. Because some things are just like just a normal stressor, that I'm just stressed, I think I'll handle it. And before you know it, you start going into worry. Then worry sets in, you start panicking, anxiety knocks at the door. The last stage you go there is depression. So it is gradual. It's not something that's happening, pop, instant, I'm in depression. It takes time before it gets to that level. Even with these other conditions, it's not something that just happens spontaneously. Unless, of course, it is genetic or inherited, then you could say that this is a different case. But most of them take time. They are gradual, and the moment they hit hard. Yeah.
And we know the pandemic is one of the contributors to what we are experiencing right now.
Yes.
But apart from what is happening globally, do we have other risk factors to mental illnesses?
So generally, the ones I've mentioned are the ones that really should be looked into in depth. But of course, there are other ones like say violence that was not intended. What do I mean by this? Say, for example, you are a security enforcement agent, and you say you're going about your business, trying to keep law and order. Then in the midst of your work, you get entangled in a confrontation that maybe requires you to pull out a rifle and do whatever you need to do. Now, such scenes, when come to play sometime later, they might affect you. So at times, even the kind of job environment that you are in might bring these stressors and lead us into depression or any other mental health conditions. Because, as I said, there are those jobs which are very risky and require a lot of specialized attention and care. And if not handled, then, of course, just a question of time before you be diagnosed with a mental illness.
For instance, the frontline health workers.
Exactly.
Can you paint a picture for us on what they might be going through mentally and how best how best should they be protected? In your own words, do you think that they have well been protected even as they stay at the front line in the fight? Yeah.
So in the scenario of the healthcare workers, of course, they are the people that we hold dear to our hearts, because the kind of work they do is unmatched, so to speak. Because the moment somebody is unwell, they believe that if I go to this hospital, this health facility, I'm going to be assisted and get the help I need. But the problem is the country is sometimes understaffed. You go to some facilities, we don't have enough medics to assist with various conditions. So this means that this medic will have to work extra hours so that they attend to all the patients they need to attend to. And this consequently means that they'll go into burnout. They'll be stressed. They'll start feeling fatigued. They'll be anxious at some point. And just a question, I'm out of time, sorry, before they go into depression. Yeah. So with the with the healthcare workers, in my opinion, more needs to be done, because the work they're doing, as I mentioned, is quite unmatched. In terms of how their work conditions in some facilities, honestly, it's deplorable. That's why at times when you see them going to the streets and clamoring for haki yetu, it means a lot, because for them to leave and say that haki yetu, it means that they need something that is much more sensible, better working environments, better pay, and better terms of engagement, so that they are also healthy and in the good state of mind to deliver these health services, so that you don't have accidents as a result of negligence or fatigue from these healthcare workers. Yes. And
what would it mean for a country to have a large population that is mentally unhealthy? Let's talk about the impact, of what impact either to an individual, family, even a country. Yeah. So I'd like to start from the very basic unit, the family unit, because assuming just one person in the family, assuming it's the breadwinner, the father has a mental health condition, that means that the other partner who is left, that's the mother, will have to match up to deliver for the kids or the household for that reason. That possibly means working 2 jobs to make ends meet. This one parent has to pay the fees, for example, they have to pay the bills, they have to make sure that there's food on the table, and all these other aspects. And when she does this, she's also struggling with her fair share of stresses. And if she doesn't open up to a professional for assistance, then she's likely to transfer these same challenges or these same problems to the children. And even if she doesn't transfer them directly, the children will see that mom is suffering to make ends meet for us. What does that do to them? Their academics are likely to be hampered or affected by that. They go to school, they don't match up. They'll graduate fine. They graduate, they go to the job market, they don't have the competencies needed to match up in the job market. That's why you end up having, for lack of a better word, quirks in different professions, right. And that consequently means that the whole economy of the country is affected, the GDP is affected, and that makes the country sink and go low. So that's how big it can get. Yeah. And from the seriousness of which you are describing this, the impact that mental illnesses can have in a nation. So how do you diagnose mental illness? What are some of the things that you can look out for in a person who is not mentally unhealthy? Do you also have some self-assessment tips? Yeah.
Yeah, so yes, there are some basic self-assessment tips that are available. Thanks to the internet, we have all the information at our disposal. But above and beyond, I think it's important to see a therapist once in a while so that we just check how we're faring on. You see, the same way that we go for routine checkups for our bodies, say our dental hygiene, we go to our dermatologist, the same way that we should take caution to visit practitioners in the mental health field so that we get to see how well we are psychologically or mentally for that reason. Yeah. So the problem is, at times we overlook the effect that these conditions can have on us. And if this is prolonged, then there's a problem. So how do you self-diagnose? Because different mental illnesses have different signs. Some are related and might confuse you, but generally, the moment you start feeling irritable, the moment you start feeling tired, anxious, you lose sleep at night, loss of appetite, these basic things, the moment they start going away, then you should ask yourself, I think something is wrong here and I need to see a doctor or a counselor for that reason, so that I am assisted through. But I'm like, I'll just be fine. I think I'm just tired. But if it's the same story Monday to Monday, there is a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And still on helping patients who are not mentally okay.
Yes.
So do we have treatment for some of these? Can they be reversed? Can some of these conditions be reversed? And which one would you say it would be really too late to help our patients who are suffering from the kinds that you'll be talking about?
Yeah, so the good news is that most of these mental health conditions can be reversed or can be treated, of course, with therapy. The only challenge is that they might take a bit of time to reverse these conditions, if at all the person had slid into the later stages of the mental health condition at hand. Some, of course, because of their nature, might need specialized care and attention, including admission or other forms of treatment so that the person is restored back. Some might need medication as well as therapy. Some might need therapy alone. Some might need purely medication. So depending on the level that the person is, it would mean different interventions. I wouldn't exclusively say that some are completely irreversible. But the truth is, with the kind of care that is accorded to this patient, then they can get better or eventually be restored to their former health. Yeah.
And how do you describe a scenario where someone just wakes up and maybe commits suicide or even hurts the other person? To what is it still a mental health issue, or because sometimes when people go to court and they're asked why they had to do what they are doing, they say it's anger. How do you differentiate that it's just someone is only angry but doesn't have any of these mental conditions?
Yeah, thank you. So you see, with the example you're giving, say for example, somebody wakes up, takes a rifle or a weapon and injures the other person, we can't honestly say that it's just anger. This is something that has been contemplated time and again. And you see, before somebody takes that action, that means that they planned it carefully. Or rather, first of all, they thought about it, they planned it, and then they went to execution. Now, before reaching execution, they had the chance in between to make things different. But because there's that overwhelming urge to do or to make do with their plan, they go ahead and do it. And whatever reasons they give, that I was angry or I was agitated, is more or less but a defense mechanism to justify whatever they did. They know very well it's wrong, what they did is wrong, and that's why they'll say that I was angry or was agitated. Yeah. So saying that I just did it is not reason enough. And that's why I said it's important the moment you start feeling irritable, uneasy, it's good to reach out for help so that you're assisted, so that we avert situations whereby we wake up to the news and the first thing we see on the news article is somebody has killed their partner, somebody has killed their child or injured their neighbor. Yes. As
we wind up, let's address the issue of the solution. Let's give a solution to our viewers, and of course the gap there is. For a very long time there is stigma. For a very long time mental illnesses are usually associated with someone is crazy, mad. Those terms are used for any person coming out to say that they are not mentally okay. What really, do we have this surprise bullet that can sort all these out, and all of a sudden people are now coming out to talk about these issues? What gap there is, and solutions moving forward to just avert what you're talking about, the crisis that we are staring at as a nation? Yeah,
so in my opinion, I think it's important and poignant to start from the very basic unit, and that is the family. Let it start from in there. The moment your child comes home from school, for example, and they seem off, sit down with them, ask them, you seem unwell. Is there anything the problem? Be a friend to your daughter, be a friend to your son. Let them know that you mean well for them. Let them know that you care and that you are there to listen to them. The spouses as well, whenever you have confrontations or issues in the family, try and reach out to the other partner and get to understand what the problem is. Because at the moment you start assuming that they're just a kid, they're just an adult, they can cope on their own, then we miss the point. So the solution, if you ask me, starts from the home, from the family. The moment the family gets it right, the country will get it right, and eventually the globe will be a better place.
And the society.
And the society at large, of course. So, and see, even as you're mentioning, with the society, the stigma that comes with it, the moment somebody says that I am unwell, I have this mental health condition, don't be quick to judge. Seek to understand. And I think that's where we miss the point. A lot of us are so quick to open their mouth and cast aspersions, minus understanding. Before you say that person X and Y is crazy, or we dab them with these funny names, get to understand what the problem is. Because the moment you understand, you'll be empathetic and not sympathetic. Mm-hmm. And that's what's needed.
But I think, Elmad, it also comes narrows down to understanding and awareness, as you had said. Because if I wake up and tell my parents that I feel moody, they'll just be like harsh on me, and they'll not think it might be a mental health disorder. So how do we change that again?
And even with that, I'd say the moment you know yourself,
or they'll call you lazy.
Well, chances are they'll call you lazy, but the moment you know yourself, you will undoubtedly be able to govern your internal thought processes and be able to match up with those of other persons. Yeah.
All right, Elmad Regan, thank you so much for your time and for helping us understand more about mental health and how to take care of ourselves.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, and that's all the time we had for our show tonight. Thank you so much for your company. It's always great to have you join us on Family Matters every Sunday at 9 p.m. See you again next time on our next episode. Do enjoy the rest of our programming, and God bless.